Street Level Radio, KLYC, The Cruise, a landmark decision coming down from the Oregon Supreme Court about the landfill near McMinnville. On the telephone with us right now is Ramsey McPHillips, who has been pushing the issue of the landfill in Yamhill County, saying that it's negatively impacting his farm practices, including his farm near McMinnville. Ramsey, welcome to KLYC.
Thanks.
So the decision from the Supreme Court is that negative impacts from a non-farm use cannot be essentially paid off. In other words, if somebody is negatively impacting a farm land, they can't just give you a cash settlement and have them continue to be involved in that activity that's decreased the value of the land. How important is this decision?
Well, the decision obviously went all the way to the top level of Oregon's judicial system, and that means that there were issues far bigger than Ramsey McPhillips and McPhillips Farm. Had the landfill in Yamhill County been allowed to allow a giant industrial source in farmland be able to trespass or change the costs and practices of the surrounding farm use, and then just simply pay it off, where would that have stopped? And so the Oregon Supreme Court realized that Oregon's land use is set up to protect large tracts of farmland. And if a large landfill were to be allowed to affect surrounding farmland, those large tracts would begin to fracture, because they'd have to change the practices. They'd have to move away from the landfill. It just wouldn't be as profitable for those surrounding farmland. So, you can have a landfill on farmland, but only if there's an invisible fence that goes up, a wall, so to speak, and whereby the landfill keeps to themselves. They don't have the right to pollute, to be a nuisance, to leak, or to lower property values. And if they do, then they can't have their landfill. Unfortunately, what the county had said is they could do all those trespasses, and I, as a neighbor, would be forced to take money to compensate for those issues, or allow the landfill to come onto my property and satisfy the issues and problems with their employees so that they could continue to operate and give the county their tipping fees and import trash.
Do you view this ruling by the Oregon Supreme Court as setting the bar higher and actually putting a new set of teeth in Oregon's land use planning laws?
It totally does. The statute that we've been fighting about is one of the most used statutes in the state to preserve farmland. So now, any time that a large non-farm use wants to stick itself in the middle of farmland, it is going to refer to Ramsey McPhillips Stop the Dump Coalition versus Yamhill County Riverbend Landfill, and know that, yes, they may put their large entity in farmland, but if they do, they've got to be good neighbors, and they cannot affect the neighbors that they're interloping into, who are the farmers who have preceded them and have more of a right to farm than the landfill has a right to trespass and pollute.
Do you think this decision has impacts reaching past the boundaries of the state of Oregon, possibly in other states?
Well, if you think about American property rights, good fences make good neighbors, right? If the U.S. government allowed any entity to simply buy off a neighbor and force them to take the money, that would be just not part of good judicial policy, in a free society. So no one should be forced to exist with a bad nuisance neighbor by virtue of being paid off whether they want to or not. The neighbor should just become a good neighbor and take care of their own problems, and we can, in America, we can all just get along.
What is this going to do for the operation of the dump? Does it force the dump to cease operations? Where are we in that particular issue?
Well, as you know, Riverbend Landfill has lost most of its market. The metro region, which is 1.2 million people, have pulled out permanently by ordinance never to send their garbage here again because they were so concerned about the environmental degradation of the farmland and didn't want to be culpable for expanding it. And then the city of McMinnville did the same. So because garbage is so competitive, and most of the rest of the garbage in Oregon is already reserved or in contract to other landfills, there really isn't any feedstock to supply that huge facility. It costs a lot of money to run that thing, and there's a certain number of tons that they would need to bring in there every year in order for it to pencil out. And I don't see them being able to operate given this recent Supreme Court decision and the fact that there is no longer a need for Riverbend landfill. Remember, the argument originally for it to be here was that we had to have the landfill or our garbage rates were going to go up. Well, we've had real-time contracts since that fight in all the hearings locally was fought, and those real-time quotes are, yes, McMinnville's garbage did go up 10%, which is actually very little considering a utility bill, not the 250% that they told us it would go up. And ironically, now that Portland Metro is not going here, they had to find a new place to send their garbage, and their garbage went down. So not using Riverbend landfill for 1.2 million people in Portland caused their garbage to go down. So you add the no longer a need for this landfill economically, and the fact that they are penned in by virtue of the Supreme Court Justice decision that they can no longer trespass on the surrounding farmland. Remember, they're surrounded by farmland. I don't see how they're going to be able to continue, and we hope that they just listen to their fiduciary responsibilities as some board in Texas and close up shop and move on.
So closing up shop and moving on, there's also the issue of what's going to happen to the garbage that's already there on the ground. Are you concerned about that?
Well, they're stuck monitoring it for 30 years. The Environmental Protection Agency has red-marked Riverbend landfill. There's a current study going on. We don't know much about it. But the only landfill in Oregon which is now under the watchful eye of the Environmental Protection Agency is Riverbend landfill. We can't find much information about it. But by law, when they close, they have to continue to operate all the gas systems, all the water leachate systems, all the road systems, all the cover for 30 years. And then in 30 years, both the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Environmental Quality will assess whether they can walk away. And so far in Oregon, when landfills close, no landfill, even after the 30 years, has gotten to the point of not being hazardous that anyone has been able to walk away. So Waste Management's on the hook to monitor and prevent any further degradation from the existing landfill for a very, very long time. And that's why they don't want to close. The most expensive thing a landfill can do is close, because they still have to operate all of those facilities and infrastructure, but there's no income coming in.
So what this decision by the Oregon Supreme Court has done is reset it, as we said earlier in the interview, and now it goes back to LUBA for a reevaluation of their previous decision with the new guidelines set by the Supreme Court.
Right. And then LUBA will come up with a new opinion, and they will send that back to Yamaha County. And as we know, Yamaha County now is made up of a different commissioner composition. One can argue that the last election was won or lost over the landfill issue. And certainly the new commissioner, who is a farmer, is going to consider the Oregon Supreme Court decision in his decision when he votes whether or not to allow the landfill to expand.
Closing thoughts.
It's been a 25-year fight personally, but it's become a much bigger issue for the state, and I'm really proud that this group that has fought so hard, the wine industry, all the farmers, all the water stewards, just amazing people have banded together to make sure in a precedent-setting case that Oregon's farmland is protected from interloping large corporations or entities from breaking up large tracts of farmland. You know, when my family came here pre-statehood, we got a land claim. It was 640 acres, a section. That's what they gave you back in the day because they knew that's what it took to run a business in forest or land or farmland. So the Supreme Court just validated that whole concept by virtue of saying, no, we're not going to let you divide up the farmland by patchworking in corporations and non-conditional use. We really value big tracts, and you're going to have to keep your landfill to yourself.
And again, we're talking about the recent decision, very recent decision by the Oregon Supreme Court stating that negative impacts on non-farm developments near farmland cannot be mitigated by simply making payments or essentially, for lack of a better term, paying off the farmers. The Supreme Court ruling that if it's a negative impact on agricultural land, impairing the agricultural practice, that practice by the impairer has to stop. And it'll be interesting to see how this goes forward in Luba and on the local court level. Ramsey McPHillips, thank you for talking to us. Ramsey McPHillips is with the Stop the Dump Coalition.
My pleasure.
AM 1260 KLYC, The Cruise, on the street, online, on the air. Depend on us.